In this video, I'm going to tell you whether in 2025 you should be spending your money on an Apple Watch or the new Whoop MG, or even if you should buy both, and whether you should be relying on these devices to help build an elite physique. I'm going to compare what both the Apple Watch and the Whoop can and can't do so you can make the best decision for you. So firstly, what are the price points for these two devices? The Apple Watch Ultra, which I'm comparing here, costs £749, and the Whoop MG on the Life membership, £349. However, the key difference with the Whoop is that this is paid on an annual basis, which also gives you access to their app. So unlike the watch where you're paid and done, if you want to be able to continue using your Whoop, you should expect a long-term financial commitment. The obvious key difference between these two devices is that on the Apple Watch you have a visible touch screen, whereas the Whoop is just a band which is purely tracking different data points throughout the day and night. The obvious benefit of the watch in this respect is it can be a lot easier to see at a glance different data points such as your steps or your heart rate, and it does also combine with your iPhone to give you notifications, messages and everything else, which isn't really the point of this video, but maybe worth keeping in mind if you're thinking about investing in one of these two options. One of the biggest features of the Whoop MG is it does have a 14-day battery life, mainly due to the fact that it doesn't have a screen, whereas the Apple Watch Ultra on the other hand is up to 42 hours or 72 hours on low power mode. The real impact of this for me was that it's much easier to keep your Whoop band on to consistently track sleep overnight without having to worry about charging it the next day at a point where I'd actually want to be wearing the watch. The Whoop also comes with a wireless charger that you can slot onto the band and charge the battery whilst you're still wearing it, so as to not lose any of your data, which feels like quite a cool add-on and a really smart bonus. The first thing I want to cover is the features that both of these devices share. That includes continuous and resting heart rate variability, menstrual cycle tracking, respiratory rate, blood oxygen, skin temperature, sleep tracking, VO2 max, and workout detection. When it comes to the Apple Watch Ultra, there are some things the watch can do that the Whoop can't. For example, a real-time ECG, hypertension notifications, sleep apnea notifications, and also on-device GPS, which links up live with workout metrics, which is especially useful if you're someone who's into running. With what the Whoop can do that the Apple Watch can't is where the Whoop really leans into its strong points and focuses on what it was primarily designed for, which is that focus on insights, recovery and performance. Using various different data points, your Whoop will give you a personalized sleep, recovery and strain score each day that you can use to guide your training or the intensity of your workouts. It gives you health span metrics and a guide of your pace of aging, and it also gives you daily blood pressure insights, which is effectively an estimate of what your blood pressure is that day. Now, I've tested this blood pressure feature a couple of times and actually found it to be fairly accurate, but other than finding it interesting, I can't really say that it's been a super helpful feature to have, especially as the blood pressure insights and irregular heart rhythm notifications are what makes the Whoop MG on the Life membership £130 more every year than the alternative Peak membership. Just a quick note to say, if you're enjoying this so far, hit the subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my latest videos. Let's get back to it. One thing I have noticed with these devices is a slight discrepancy between some of the statistics that they track every day. I'd say the biggest frustration with my Whoop is it doesn't seem to track steps particularly well, and while some days it'll be within about 500 of what my Apple Watch is telling me, other days it can be out by thousands, which can make it quite frustrating if I didn't want to wear the watch but still wanted to track my daily steps. On top of that, I've also noticed that during workouts, my heart rate on my Apple Watch can be in the region of 160, whereas on the Whoop, it'll be telling me 120 to 130. It's hard to say which device is accurate, and I haven't really tried to take it manually, but my inclination in those moments is it is the Whoop that could be a little bit off. Another metric both the watch and the Whoop track is HRV, where my Apple Watch tells me that I'm averaging a HRV of 55 milliseconds and the Whoop tells me closer to 40. Obviously, I don't have any way of actually saying for certain which device is more accurate than the other here, but it just felt worth noting that some of the metrics, and there were others, weren't quite matching up with the other device. Ultimately though, I don't think that's too important, as really what you're looking for is a baseline from that device, e.g. your average score over a period of maybe a month or longer, and then looking at any changes that might occur and understanding why that's happening, for example, fatigue or stress. When it comes to sleep, I have found it fascinating tracking this, as it's not really something I've done properly before. That said, prior to buying the Whoop, I had been warned that the sleep tracking element wasn't entirely accurate and that the band wasn't always very good at picking up spells during the night when you're awake. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had 1 or 2 nights where sleep hasn't been great and my band wasn't always the best on picking up on that, but that said, I do think that that's a problem for all wearables as opposed to being a specific Whoop issue, where it can be tricky for a device to know when you're lying in bed still and not moving much if you are in fact awake or asleep. In terms of the Apple Health app versus the Whoop app certainly digs far deeper into insights. After thinking about this, the best way I could think to summarize it was that the watch and the Whoop both track very similar amounts of data. However, with the Whoop, you're essentially paying for their app to summarize multiple different data points and give you an indication of what a potential outcome might be, for example, poor or good recovery. On the flip side, the Apple Watch will present you with a lot of that same information on paper. However, unless you use a third-party app, none of that information is summarized, especially from the perspective of looking at multiple data points together, and you're really left on your own to decide what to do with that data that you do have. After using my Whoop for a couple of weeks and frequently reviewing the app, there are a couple of things which I think are worth mentioning, especially from the perspective as to whether a device like this can help you with getting into elite shape and be a useful training tool. A lot of Whoop's advertising is based around professional athletes and being a useful guide for knowing when to push with training and when to pull back. That's all well and good, however, there have been a couple of occasions where I felt like I've slept well, energy levels are good, and I'm pumped for a great session in the gym, only to look at the Whoop app and be told that my recovery score for that day is low. I appreciate that the app can only go on the data that it has, but if I feel good and know that I'm ready for a tough session, I'm not going to back off or stay out the gym just because an app is telling me I'm not recovering well that day. I also think a big part of weightlifting is about your mental performance, and it could definitely be easy to go into the gym and allow yourself to have an off day and use lighter weights if you think in your head that you've got a justification for doing that. I'm not saying that the information in the app is never correct, and maybe how I feel is different to how my body is actually recovering, but it's definitely something I found interesting at least, and would certainly influence whether I felt it was worthwhile renewing the relatively costly subscription when it did come to the end of that first year. That said, one of the recovery features that the Whoop has, which I do think is a great idea, is the daily journal. Here you can create a custom list that you fill out at the end of each day, such as whether you consume caffeine, alcohol, took certain supplements, exercised, and so on. And then over time, Whoop will look at that data and the days that you did or didn't do certain things and show you how it has a direct correlation, perhaps on your sleep or your recovery. For people out there who are quite data driven, if you can see on paper how your sleep is directly impacted when you have an alcoholic drink, for example, that might be useful information for helping you make positive decisions about your health. So with that all in mind, should you get the Apple Watch, should you get the Whoop, or should you buy both? To be clear, I definitely don't think you need both the watch and the Whoop, mostly for the reason that the information tracked by both devices really is pretty similar. If you're someone who's super into seeing all of your data, having that analysed on your behalf and give an indication of areas where you can make improvements, plus you don't mind the idea of paying an annual subscription, then really I think the Whoop could be great. On the flip side, if you're not too fussed about the data, an accurate steps tracker is more important and you're happy just popping into the Apple Health app from time to time to see how things are going, then maybe the watch would be the better choice. But when it comes to building an elite physique, I'm not really sure you need either, and my approach to training over time has really come down to mastering the skill of listening to my own body and knowing when it's there and when it's not. I've not always got that exactly right, and maybe with the help of the Whoop I could have made better choices from time to time, but £350 is expensive just to spare myself the odd crappy workout here and there. I hope you found this helpful, and if you have any questions about either of the devices, drop a comment below and make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and keep an eye out for my next video coming soon.